Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Ron and Daniel for another episode of Monday Morning with Daniel and Ryan.
I'm not special enough to
I
get
know
my own
we don't have a
show.
theme song or we don't have a name. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about negotiations and making the offer. So one thing I will like to say before this is one of those things that it sounds basic, but it's like the thing that investors forget to do. They spend all this time to look at the house, to run the numbers, to do that, and it's kind of like, so what do you want to do? You know?
All I can think of right now is the air conditioner turned off again. Sorry. That's just the only thing going on in my head right now is that the air conditioner is turned off again. It's hot up here.
It's live.
We are live. Sorry about that, but I'm hot and I'm not going to sit up here for the next 45 minutes without the air conditioner on.
Just pushed it down to like 70, Trey.
So,
Anyway,
back
making
to
the
the
offer and
subject.
negotiating.
So this seems to be a big problem for a lot of people. They get freaked out about, what to offer the people, how to offer the people. I actually wrote a blog about this several years ago, and we'll talk about that specific strategy and how it's worked for me in the past. But when you're coming up with a seller and you're going through the house, you need to make an offer. I know for a fact that you've told me of several stories of people talking to you. I know of dozens of people talking to me. They'll go walk a house. They'll go through all the trouble of figuring out the comps, trying to figure out the repairs, and then they'll get to a point where like, well, they'll never accept that. I can't do it. And it's just like, come on.
And what it is it's like taking your life and what you think it should be and imposing your beliefs and your mentality and your opinions on somebody else. Like you may live in a 5-bedroom, 10,000 square foot house, and that might be a mansion to somebody else, but I guarantee to somebody like Donald Trump or whoever, it's probably a dump. So it's all relative.
It really is. So I've been surprised before and actually kicked myself because I didn't offer low enough, and that's quite clearly seen whenever you make the offer, and their immediate response is, okay. And then I'm just sitting there like,
Damn it.
I didn't go in deep enough, so.
Yeah, so that's your first quick nugget of the morning, is if you make an offer and their first response is, okay,
you
didn't go low enough, and maybe you didn't do your homework and you didn't run the numbers correctly.
So that's always a point in time where you're like, maybe I should have offered less. What did I do wrong?
Yeah, because I've been a part of situations where, you make what you think is a fair offer, but yet it's beneficial to you, and then later you learn that you were the highest offerer bidder by like 15 grand, and you're like, where the F did I mess up? Where did I screw up on running the numbers? What is everybody else seeing that I didn't see?
It can't. The numbers piece is probably, in my opinion, there's several hiccups where I'm seeing new investors we're struggling, and almost always comes to negotiating with the seller and or the analysis of the property itself. Mm-hmm. Some people are really good with talking with the seller, but they get really scared about are my numbers right? And then I'll have other people that'll drop their numbers and get to a point where they're comfortable with it, but they're scared to make that conversation with the seller happen.
And again, not again, but a quick shout out to Grant for him pointing it out in the Grant Teach Yourself Things series is people forget that this is a business. This is not for them it might be emotional, but for you it is a business. So what Grant likes to do and forgive me if I butcher what he does, but he likes to set the standard and pace very quickly by saying, this is a business decision for me. So yes, I would love to give you $1 million, but for me to make money on this business, I got to give you 12 grand.
That is one of the things that I liked whenever Grant mentored me when I first got started in Subject 2 and stuff. So I got a lot of direct one-on-one teaching from him. And that was one of the things that he always stressed was how to break that conversation with the seller. It would be something along the lines of, I'd love to help you, and if I was in a situation to just help as many people as I could come in here and give you $90,000 for it. But this is a business decision. This is how I support my family. This is how I pay the bills, and I have to make a wise business decision here. $80,000 is just not a wise business decision. I'm stuck at 74. If we can do 74, that's where I'm at. As much as I'd like to go higher than that, I just can't. It would end up taking money off my plate.
And I think the biggest hang-up is the fear aspect. Because people are scared of being kicked out of homes, being spat on, being yelled at, being cried in front of. And it's just fear. And it's fear from all those ranges. And there's probably 10,000 more examples that you could just yell out. But at the end of the day, it's you're in this business to buy a house, and who knows what your exit strategy is. But at this moment in time, in this, what we're talking about is your job is to buy a house. And you could be fearful, but you got to overcome that. And again, I'm not trying to be rah-rah, but it's literally, you just got to say, you know what? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to yell at me. They're going to cry at me. They're going to kick me out of the house. They're going to spit on me. They're going to call me a blah, 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 you horrible human being. But you know what?
That's the worst case.
I mean, they might pull a shotgun on you, but that's why you got to be careful.
Overall, getting through those fears are honestly legitimate. There are going to be times where you're just going to piss people off. The faster you come to terms with the fact that, you know what, you're going to piss some people off. Some people aren't going to like you. Not everybody's going to sell you their house. And just get out there and start doing it, the better off you're going to be. Some of the things that I learned as I got started, one of my mentors told me, the quicker you get used to being told no, the better you're going to be at it taking the no and overcoming it. And the advice he gave me was go out and look for FSBOs on Craigslist. This is nothing revolutionary, but go out and look for FSBOs on Craigslist and call 100 of them. At least call 100 of them and get them actually on the phone. Not just call 100 numbers, but talk to 100 people. And the advice he gave me is when you call them, if the property's listed on Craigslist, let's say for $200,000, you absolutely do not get off of the phone without giving them an offer of at least half of what they're asking for it. So if they're asking $200,000, you have to, over the phone, soft pitch a $100,000 offer, and you're going to learn really quickly how people are going to react whenever you give them an offer that's way outside of what they were expecting.
And that's great advice, but if you have time and you have the effort, I would actually suggest one further and actually go to the house, because the last thing you want to do is when you actually have a lead that you paid for, you don't want to burn that lead by gaining experience on that. So why not gain experience with those FSBOs, go to the house, hey, I want 200. Okay, cool, I'll give you 85. And then you go through those worst case scenarios. Get the F out of my house. Okay, cool. So 85 is not a deal? You know, and you do that enough times, you're going to get that Teflon coating, you're going to get that armor, and you're going to be able to figure out how to deal with those situations.
So that's exactly why I was calling the FSBOs, and I really quickly found out it doesn't take too much to figure it out. You offer somebody half of what they're asking for their house, you get some really interesting responses, mostly FUs or just hang-ups. It's not even like they respond. It's just hang up, or they'll be like, well, "What? Are you stupid? You're just like some piece of crap wannabe investor." They'll say everything that they want to say, and you'll feel bad for about a split second, and then you'll call the next one, and you'll get to a point where you're just used to it.
I will say, if you really want to get experience in this, and I'm not saying to do this, I have never done this, and I'm not saying you should do this, but the thought came in my head, if you really want to get those FUs out of the way, call estate sales and offer them half.
Call whoever you need to call and get comfortable with making that offer. I cold call estate sales quite often when I first got started. One of the guys that that was coming to me asking me for help and looking for things, and what I recommended to him was just start cold calling estate sales and making offers on properties to go see them. And within a week, he had 2 properties under contract, and it works. So cold calling estate sales is a good point. I actually used to do that. So
you would offer half?
I'd offer what I thought was legit, regardless of what they were asking for. If I thought I could make a deal out of it at 140 and they're asking 220 for it, I offered 140.
Right.
And surprisingly enough, some of them weren't just pissed off about it. Some would be like, well, I was kind of hoping to get 220. I know that the neighbor's house sold for 220. And I was like, well, this is and then boom, you're in contract. So it wasn't too bad.
I think the biggest point of this segment today is get over the hurdle of throwing a number out there. Because again, too often you were like, because I've seen it so many times where you run the numbers, you go to the house, you do the bid, and they're like, hey, let me go back to the car, let me go back to the office, let me run some numbers, and I'll get you an offer back. Why? Like, get a rough number and then hit them between the eyes with it.
I love it. So let's get into some nuggets real quick. So whenever I started cold calling all these FSBOs, I quickly saw that I would build the rapport, and the moment I'd drop an offer out like that, it would just come crashing down. The rapport would be gone, the seller would be pissed, and the conversation was almost immediately over. With that being said, that is one of the primary reasons why if I know I have a motivated seller on the phone, I am not going to make the offer over the phone. I'm going to get an idea, ballpark of how motivated this person is. And if I know for a fact that they're motivated, I'm going to set the appointment and get to the house ASAP. I'm not going to do any further conversations over the phone because anything I say over the phone could potentially irritate this person and stop the opportunity. So if I know they're motivated, immediately I'm going to get the appointment and or try to get the contract. It doesn't matter. If I'm on the phone, I'll get the contract and or get the appointment ASAP.
It's kind of like if you're at a bar and you see someone that you're interested in, you start with like 100 points. And you start talking to them. Every time you say another word, you're losing a point. So if you can say a couple words and then they show interest, the more you talk, you're screwed. So just shut up.
It really is kind of that way with sellers. I mean, you get to a point where you know the seller is ready to sell and or you know that the seller is motivated. Shut your mouth, grab the contract, get the purchase agreement put together, and get it signed. Whether if you can get that done over the phone, get it done over the phone. Make sure you got an option period in there and that the seller is cool with that. But make sure you get that and then go to the appointment. Because if they're motivated, somebody's going to get the appointment. And if they get it before you, you're done.
And one thing I'd like to add on that is, yes, build rapport. Rapport is huge in this business. But there is a fine line between having rapport and being their friend. Because here's the thing. If you're their friend, in their head, they're going to be like, you know what? Ryan's a cool guy. He'll understand that I went with Daniel on this contract.
Yeah. You need to make it very clear.
You need to, make it very clear that I mean, again, I'm not saying be an asshole, but when you're friends with somebody, it's a little bit easier to screw them over than somebody you're doing business with. And I don't know what it is, and maybe I'm just wrong on this, but that's how I feel about it. Because how many times have you had that relationship with somebody? I mean, we had that neighbor on Mountain View. She loved us. She wanted to do business with us. She liked us. She's like, oh, but by the way, my mother's house I was going to sell to you. I'm selling to somebody else. But hey, here's I have something at the house. If you want to come by and pick it up, it's a present for you. I'm like, I want the house. I don't want a gift card.
But I do believe that rapport is going to buy more houses than money ever will. I mean, if you establish a strong relationship, it doesn't have to be all lovey-dovey, go out to dinner type of stuff. Although dinners have gotten me some money, you need to establish that rapport from an authoritative figure. I would say not from a passive figure, but to at least a point of a position of not so much control either, but establishing that you are an expert in the business and that you know what the hell you're talking about.
Right, but that you're clearly here to do business. That being said, there's plenty of examples out there where you become friends with the people later and they bring you more deals because they like you. Yes, you want them to like you, but you need to make sure that you're there to buy houses, not be their buddy.
So where I was going with that is what I found when I was doing the cold calls on the Craigslist FSBOs is I could build the rapport, but as soon as I made the offer, it tanked. So I had to find a way through that experience on the phone of how to make that offer and still keep the rapport up so that way it wasn't a combative offer. It was more so an opportunity to get the ball rolling. When I'm sitting down with a seller, sellers and all of us have pretty much been trained, the first person to speak loses. You don't want to throw out the number because you might throw out a number that's way lower than what I would have been willing to pay and you feel like you lose. So sellers, quite often, not all the time, sometimes you can just flat out ask them, if I could make you an offer today that would satisfy it, what would that need to be? And sometimes they'll just flat out tell you what it is to be. But a lot of times you're going to get that seller that's like, well, tell me what you want. Well, right at that point in time, if I truly offer them what I'm looking for and I'm just being flat out serious about it, it started melting the conversation sometimes. Like if I know that they're probably in the ballpark of around 100 grand and I know that my offer is going to be somewhere around 60, and if I just come out and I was like, well, right now based on everything I'm looking at on your house, I can give you 60 grand for it. Now, true, that can work, but a lot of times the seller is going to get hit real hard. This worked for me probably about 2/3 of the time, and you have to tell who your seller is. You know, is your seller an emotional person? Are they thinking with emotion, or are they a numbers person? The numbers people, this didn't work so well with, but most people were not the numbers people. With numbers people, you take a different approach, but with them, I'd be like, so, I mean, I know that we really need to get this wrapped up, and we need to figure out a number where we're both good at. I know you're looking for probably right around 100 on it, but if I could give you 200,000 and close on it before the end of the week, is that something you think we could do?
What?
And that's exactly what happens. Whenever you throw that out, I just offer them double what I'm anticipating that they're looking for, and I'll just stop cold turkey right there, and I'll get that exact response out of them. I'll get that quirk, what? Mm-hmm. And they'll start asking questions. They're like, what do you mean 200 grand? And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's never negotiate. And I'll start stuttering. I'll start making
it hard for me.
I'll start making it like a joke. I'll start playing around with it, and I'll always judge their reaction off of this. But it worked very well for me on a lot of offers. And I'd kind of start stuttering. I'm sorry. I always get nervous about this whole negotiation number stuff. I'm supposed to start low and then go high. I started high and then went low. Obviously, I'd like to buy it for 200 grand, but my wife would probably divorce me if I did. And if it was up to me, I'd probably want to get it for $1. But there's no way you'd ever sell it for $1. And I would start just being kind of friendly about it, so that way. But I would start out with twice what I think they'd be worth, and then I'd immediately counter it with, well, obviously I couldn't pay 100 grand for it or 200 grand for it, but I just offered you $1. You obviously wouldn't take $1 for it. But what if I offered like 10, 20, 30 grand, and I just say it while I'm laughing, so it doesn't even sound like I'm making an offer, and then I'll just go dead silent, because that's quite honestly what I just did. I offered you $1, quickly renegotiated up to 10, 20, 30, knowing they're wanting 100. I'm willing to pay 70, but I shut the hell up at 30 grand. And it's crazy to see how things happen right there. Almost probably 90% of the time whenever I'd come off with that pitch, obviously that was just a very quick explanation of how to make it happen. You got to gauge how the seller's responding. But once I'd stop and go just dead at 30, they'd kind of just sit there for a second. They're like, what just happened? And then they'd normally just kind of, well, I can't, the lowest I could do would be 75. Where I knew for a flat out fact 2 seconds ago they were at 100 grand. Mm-hmm. But now that I got them at 75, I know that I'm at 100. The negotiation's not much further off from there. But I can get them to at least open up and tell me what their number is and or the cause for their number. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they'd respond and be like, I need at least 75 grand just to pay the house off. Well, boom, now I know why they're asking for 75 grand. Or they'll come back and say something like, I can't come in, I know I was wanting 100, but I can't do any less than 90. I owe 75 and I need at least 15 to pay off my credit card debt. Now I know what's going on there. So once I've at least broken the ice, sellers, all they know is that they're not supposed to throw out a number first. Now, if you come out of the gates and you throw out a number that is just absolute shit in their eyes, the negotiations go bad from there. But if I can get them excited about it up front by throwing out a number that they weren't expecting that gets them all warm and fuzzy, I'm getting them at a point, and then I just immediately come back with, that doesn't make business sense to me. Mm-hmm. I would gladly pay you 200 grand, but this is a business transaction, kind of like what Grant was saying, and there's no way that I'd ever be able to feed my family paying 200 grand for this house. Likewise, I'd love to offer you $1 for it, but there's no way that you would ever sell this to $1. That makes no business sense to you. So we just need to find that common ground where you and I are both making a good business decision on this transaction. And although $1 doesn't make sense, 10, 20, 30 isn't really there either, but where are we at? And almost always they're going to drop a number because you've thrown one out there.
So if you were listening to that, you heard Daniel get two things out of the people, the sellers. And that's a huge nugget if you didn't hear it. So real quick, let me summarize. By him doing that strategy, not only was he able to get them to bring down their original expectations, but also he found why they're trying to sell. And then once you know what that why is, then you can start changing up your offer. Maybe you throw in a sub 2, maybe you throw in an owner finance, maybe there's so many other strategies you could throw out there. But if you don't know what the cause of what their number is, it's hard to, you're just throwing darts in the dark. So that's huge.
It's really good. And sometimes you can just flat out ask a seller, what do you owe the bank? I'd say 50-50, they tell me. It's not too often they're just like, oh, that's not important to you. So many times you can find out right then and there what they owe the bank. 50-50 shot that it'll come off to you.
Real quick, while everybody's watching, if you're watching, please give us a like, please give us a share, let us know what you're thinking. Also, I'd like to see you in the comments below, because I know if you've been on houses, you've been called some nasty things. Let's see it. Let's see what y'all been called. Just so drop in the comment section below, what is the worst thing that's ever happened to you by making a lowball answer? And I say lowball like that because if you've been on the phones, sellers love to say, are you going to make me a lowball answer or answer a lowball offer? The reality is it's a market offer. So if you've got 20 investors all coming at you and they all give you around the same price, that's what the market is for your house. So it's not technically a lowball offer. But anyway, drop in the comments what's the nastiest things anybody's ever said or done to you at a house.
So that's segueing into the next piece, and that's going to be the offers. But before I get to the offers, I want to sit down. I would always keep with me kind of like a buy sheet. It was a piece of paper, my offer, all of the expenses, the benefits to my offer versus other people, and I'd have several of these blank sheets with me, and I would often sit down with my pen and paper, and I would offer the seller the same pen and paper. This works good with the numbers people, and it also works really good with just the really data-intense people.
Yeah, homebusters would call that the seller net sheet. So
Okay.
if you're from the Homebuster School of Training, they call it a seller net sheet.
So that's exactly what it ends up being. I didn't know what I called it. That's just what I put on it.
Because you're a genius at this shit.
I don't know. I'm not even close to that. But what I'd end up doing with it is sitting down, and I would give it to the seller, and I'd keep a copy for myself. Works really good with the data-intensive people. With some of the emotional people, you need to gauge how they're reacting to this, because they might just shut down and be like, done, I don't want to talk numbers. I just want you to buy my house and be warm and fuzzy about it. So you got to gauge how to use this, but it works really good on data people. So if I get that, all the time I'd be like, so let's just go ahead and look at this. Right now I'm looking at probably the as-is value on your house of X, and I'd say 90. Or I would ask the seller, what do you think that the as-is value of your house is right now? And I'd start getting them to fill out this sheet with me, because believe it or not, the act of somebody writing something down is a serious commitment. It's a psychological commitment to get them to write it down. So if I don't agree with their number, I might come back with some rebuttals as to why. Like if they say 90, I think it's 70, then that's a $20,000 difference that needs to be discovered and taken care of right there. So if they say 90 and I believe 70, I will use my laptop to open up comparable sales, and I'll say, this is why I believe it's at 70 as of right now. You're saying 90, but that's your neighbor 3 houses down, and yes, it is the exact same house in construction. But they didn't finish that out the same. This one has the nice floors, the upgraded air conditioning system, roof, windows. You don't have any of that. So yeah, I know Susie down the street's been your friend forever and she sold for 90. You're not gonna be able to sell for 90. This is why. So I'll show them what I truly think it's worth, and then I get them to agree on that number. So then I get them to write that down. And then the next step I'll go through, and I was like, so 70,000, well, what about, and this is just kind of a ballpark idea of how to make this run. We obviously can see that these other homes that are selling for more than yours have windows in it. How much do you think it would cost to replace the windows in this house? And I'd have a repair sheet in there as well. Windows, all right? So you think it's gonna cost about $1,800 to replace all the windows in this house. Well, let me show you really quickly on Home Depot just how much a window frame costs. A 3x5 window frame is gonna cost you around $180 to $220. You've got 19 of them in your house. That doesn't include labor, so the parts alone don't cover your estimate for replacing the windows. Now, yes, I can get some of this done cheaper than what you might find on Home Depot, but not 2/3 less than what you're finding on Home Depot. So I'd get them to come to reality with the repair estimates of this property, and I'd get them to start writing that down. Write down the windows, write down the roof, write down the flooring. How much do you think it's gonna cost to replace all the flooring in this house? If they come up with a high number, you're fairly right. I might try and say, well, you know what, I might be able to get it done a little bit cheaper than that, so it shows a line of trust between the two of us, and then I'll get them to write that down. And as they keep going through, it's like, so in perfect condition, this house is gonna sell for 90 grand. Looks like, right now, at best, we might be able to look at 70 with your house in a better condition, but look at all these repairs that we have to do.
And on that, when you're going through the repair list, you will probably at least half of when you're doing these, somebody's gonna say, yeah, but my Uncle Jeb could do it for cheaper. Your response is, well, Uncle Jeb doesn't work for me, and I don't have an Uncle Jeb. And secondly, if he can do it for cheaper, why hadn't he done it yet? You know, and then they're gonna be like,
Sometimes they'll say something like, well, I don't have the money to, and my response to that was, I've got contractors that I've worked with that are professional, and I've worked with and have established relationships for years. They're bonded, insured, they have full crews. Now, if your uncle is a bonded and licensed contractor with a full team that can knock this out for me in a matter of a couple of weeks, because well, then I'll hire him, but I need to see proof of work, and if he'll come in and quote it and give me, you know, firm numbers on it that I can believe. Now, if he's offering to do it for me for less than material costs, then it's fake. And what I can look at right here is my repair sheet says that the material costs are going to be 15, and your Uncle Jeb, you're telling me, can do it for 15. That's not possible.
But by them saying my Uncle Jeb can do it, they're not really serious about the Uncle Jeb. What they're trying to do, they're just trying to get any excuse to get out of the conversation.
And you got to reel it back in. You might be able to sidestep the conversation for a moment because you can see that they're feeling uncomfortable, but you need to get right back to it and just start pushing back on their rebuttals. They're like, well, my Uncle Jeb can do this. Well, sorry, your Uncle Jeb ain't a part of this damn transaction.
And the whole point of doing the seller net sheet is to start fishing out those rebuttals, because you don't want to get to the point where you have your agreement on the table and that's when rebuttal. You want to go ahead and start fishing out the little ones so that by the time you're ready to sign, there's nothing less to overcome.
You should never bring out any paperwork until the agreement's made. The only time the paperwork should come out is after all numbers have been clarified, closing dates, who's paying for what. Once all that's done, that's when you bring out the paperwork. But going through that seller net sheet, which is a cool term, I've never used that one before. But as you go through that, you're either going to bring these people to reality, which is what you need to do, or B, they're just not going to believe that the numbers are thrown down, and at that point in time, you don't have a deal. It needs to be thrown into a follow-up cycle and just keep going. But do everything you possibly can. Like if I know that I need to be at this property at 45, they're asking 90, that doesn't mean I give up. I'm there for another hour and a half working with them until they flat out said, get the hell out of my house. I see so many people that are like nervous about making this offer, and they're like, well, you know, based on this, I can do 45. I know you're at 90. We'll just follow up some other time, because they're in a hurry to get the hell out of the conversation. Don't be that investor. You need to be the investor that just throws a tent in the front yard and is like, all right, I know you need to talk to your wife for a bit. I'm going to hang out in the front yard. I got my laptop and my Wi-Fi connection with me. I'm just going to chill in the front yard. And you just sit there for an hour and then go back and knock on the door and be like, are y'all done talking? Because I'm ready to get a paperwork signed. Don't just walk away from the contract until they are ready to just flat out like throw you in jail for it.
Yeah, and we could literally do a full show on a seller net sheet, but just to give you a quick summary, at least the ones I've used in the past, the whole point of the seller net sheet is to show them that the difference between your offer and the offer they could make with the realtor or whatever is not that far off. And the biggest difference is the amount of hassle and the amount of time they have to go through with option they want their rebuttal versus you. So a seller net sheet will list out the sales price, then you back out your title fees, then you back out your realtor fees, then you back out your all of those contractor fees, contingencies, et cetera, and your
payments,
holding costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then also the time of like 3 months. Or the difference between my offer that is what, 5-10 grand, but yet we could be done in a week.
Guaranteed versus maybe 3 months.
Yeah, guaranteed this price versus maybe you're not a professional. Do you really think you can get this done in a 3-month period?
So those net sheets work really well for data intensive people, and it works semi well for a lot of the emotional people. The emotional people, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it, but I'd start running my numbers myself, and I would just let them follow along with it and wait until they came back and pushed back on me.
And real quick, just because we're on it, quick shout out to Jason Riney because he found an app. So everybody's always kind of nervous about when it's your stuff, but when you can use a third-party app, a third-party paperwork, whatever, then it's not you telling them, it's somebody else telling them. So I think it was a Capital Title that had an app on an iPad that was essentially a net sheet. So then it's Capital Title telling you that you're probably going to make this much, not me, the investor.
That's a good point. So if you can figure out what that is, we can drop it in the comments later.
I'll ask Jason.
So we've already discussed a lot of the terms. We've discussed the offer. We need to make sure that the seller understands Who's paying for taxes? Who's paying for title? Do we have inspection periods? When are we going to close? Are there contingencies? We need to have all of that aired and figured out after we've gone through and made our initial pitch on the offer. Once we have solidified all of our numbers, a lot of times I'm going to go through with the seller. So we're agreeing that if I close this within the next 7 days, you'll sell it to me for $70,000 cash or $60,000 cash or whatever it ends up being. You're going to move out prior to then. At closing, you're willing to accept this is a final net. You're going to pay the closing costs for this, the title fees. You're going to pay that. I'm going to pay this, this, and this. And we're going to place $500 in escrow, and you're going to give me a 3-day option on it. We agree on all that. Yes? Okay, once I've got them to verbally agree that this is what we've agreed upon, then I bring out the contract. And once I bring out the contract, I was like, what? And I always call it a purchase agreement. I always call it a contract. We're on here, but I always call it a purchase agreement. So I'm going to explain to the seller. So what I need to do is put all of this that we've agreed to in a purchase agreement so we can submit it to title. The title uses that purchase agreement to fill out all the paperwork and get all that process done. So now all we have to do is put what we've agreed to in writing, and I'll pull out the purchase agreement, and I'll just go ahead and fill in. So yes, we've agreed to a $70,000 cash purchase. You've agreed to give it to me in closing 7 days, and I'll just go through and just restate everything that we've agreed to and let them watch me fill it out. And then I'll hand it to them and just be like, I need a signature there, 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 and there. And I, in close to 10 years of doing this, have never that I can think of had a seller read the contract. Mm-hmm. I cannot think of a single time where I had a seller sit down and read 10 pages of purchase agreements.
Allegedly. He's allegedly never seen them read it.
I don't think I ever have. It's because I've gotten to the point before the purchase agreement ever comes out. They know that they're going to sell it to me for that price. There's no rebuttals really. It's just,
and you built that rapport of trust.
Yeah. So once we've got to that point, all I do is hand them is like, this is this, and then boom, signatures come out, and then we're good to go. So before we get to that point though, before I actually bring out the paperwork, let's talk about the offer, because that was something that we were going to do today. Let's talk about the numbers and let's talk about the actual offer. So I've worked with them up until now to come to an agreed upon spot, and or as we get to that, let's say I'm trying to make a $60,000 cash offer, and I can really see the further and further along we're getting into this that $60,000 is just not going to cut it. Mm-hmm. Well, what I might do from there is you always want to make, at least in my opinion, 3 offers. You can make 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, doesn't matter, but you need to make multiple offers because it's a psychological piece. Whenever you tell somebody, you give somebody a yes or no answer, if they don't like it at all, the immediate answer is going to be no. If I give somebody multiple offers, well, then they start analyzing in their own head the benefits of one over the other, which one do they like more, and then it's more open and apt for negotiation. It's like, well, if I offered you X, Y, or Z, which one makes most sense to you? And then they're going to start looking at it in the back of their head. Well, with X, it doesn't happen as fast, but I can make more money. With Y, I can make a whole lot more money, but it's going to take even longer. And I really wish I just had some upfront money. Upfront money means I have to accept this really low offer, but that gives me money right now. When maybe is there an option where you could possibly give me some money now and some money later? And now it's a negotiation versus just a yes or no. Like if I just come to you and I say, we accept $60,000 for this house. No. But what if I come to you? Well, right now, traditionally what I'd prefer to do is just come in and purchase this house cash. That's the simplest for me. That gives me the easiest range of possibilities. As a cash offer, this will be closed out in as little as 7 days. As soon as we get clear title, you can go on down the road, put the money in your back pocket, we're done. Now, if that isn't something that you're interested in and or if that number's too low, I can probably get you a little bit more money. Where do you need to be at ballpark? And then...
Would you do that if you think, because that goes against the whole throw out a number and just shut up? Because
well, yeah, I mean...
Do you use that strategy when you have a feeling that 60 is not going to cut it?
Yeah, and what I'm not trying to do up here is like a full-on role play. I'm just trying to give some guidance here. This is all going to be gauged upon your conversations with the seller. If I'm having a conversation with the seller and I'm talking about numbers and I can quickly see that they're starting to shut down, I'll pull back and I'll change the subject. Mm-hmm. And then as I start seeing their ability to conversate on business come back again, I'll bounce back into the conversation and I was like, we've got several different ways we can structure this transaction. Cash is going to be my best option. But if you'd allow me, let's say 9 months to have this paid completely off. I might be able to give you a little bit of cash up front so that way you've got some money to move, get someplace else going, but I can definitely give you a lot more money if you'll give me 6 to 9 months to completely pay you off.
I think the important thing is, if you are going to use that strategy of having options, is you make sure you're coming off as giving options versus piddle-paddling around and not really knowing what you're doing. Because if you're like, well, you could do this, or maybe we do this, or maybe do that, you're going to be like, the seller's going to be like, this person doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Everything you do needs to be done with confidence.
Right, but I think where you succeed, where other people may not succeed, is the fact that, like, when you speak about this subject matter, it is painfully obvious you know what the fuck you're talking about. Excuse my language. I mean, it's obvious that you know this stuff. So
Confidence
if you're going to do
helps when
that,
you're dealing with the seller.
Study, always be a student, and then just have confidence and just do it.
So I always try to structure at least 3 offers. One of them is going to be a cash offer, a short-term financing offer, and a long-term financing offer. And I'm going to go out of the gate with a number that's probably 10 to 20% less than what my cash offer really is. I'm not going to throw my cash offer out there. If I know that I'm going to be willing to pay 60, and through my conversation with them, I know that they're really wanting 90, what I might do is I might come out and do something like a $50,000 cash offer. It's like, I can do a $50,000 cash offer, and they're going to get sticker shocked from that. You know, we've got different ways of approaching that. We've already gone through net sheets. I'm really trying to get them in. It's like, honestly, after reviewing all of this, so that way you can see where I'm at, I'm building that net sheet out so that they can see my $50,000 offer. So I'm not even having to really pitch it right there. They're seeing why I'm throwing that out there. But I was like, so based upon everything that we've looked at here, my cash offer is 50 grand. Let them get the sticker shock out of their mind. They're gonna sit there. They're gonna try and mold that around in their head, and they're either gonna say yes or no, or let me think about it. If they're like, let me think about it, you don't let the conversation end there. Well, what do you have to think about? What questions are left to be answered? Well, I really need to talk to my husband. A lot of times this is just a deferral tactic, or I really need to talk to my friend, my neighbor. I need to talk. It's a deferral. They don't like your offer. They don't want to say no because the rapport is there, and they're not really wanting to be rude. And what they're going to do is they're going to try and defer the conversation to a later date. Do not allow that to happen.
Real quick on that, you got to make sure if you are going to do a sticker shock offer, you have built that rapport enough, and you have built that. The whole point of the seller nut sheet is the understanding of where you're coming from. If you just throw out a number, it's going to be like earlier in this segment we were talking about calling FSBOs and offering half. You're going to get the screw yous, get out of my house, what the hell are you talking about? But if you've laid the groundwork for this conversation, laid the groundwork of why you're making an offer, they may not like it, but the chances of them throwing you out of their house and cussing you out is far lower than if you just say, hey, I'll give you 50.
In the 10 years I've done this, I've only had one seller whenever I made the offer, take that back, 2, that I can think of, that just came unglued and pissed whenever I made my offer. One of them was a crotchety ass old man, and he slammed the door hard on me. And the other guy was, he was a ESL, English was his second language, and just the conversation was being difficult, and it was done. It was just like, sometimes you click with people, sometimes you don't, but there was 2 times where it just went downhill. But if you go through all of that we've discussed up until now, you figured out what type of person are they. Are they numbers people, or are they emotional people? What type of person am I dealing with? You tailor the conversation to that, and you get them slowly towards what your understanding your offer is, and then I'll make the offer. Sometimes I'll do exactly what I said. I'll offer double what they think they should be getting, and then I'll bring it back down to half of what I'd be willing to offer and let the negotiation start from there. But ultimately, the final cash offer that I'm going to lean on and hold pretty firm to is going to be probably about 15 to 20%, 10 to maybe 20% less than what I'd know I'd be willing to pay in cash. So if I know for a fact I'm willing to pay 60, I'm probably going to offer 50. And at 50 grand, what's going to happen is I'm going to go silent. I'm going to see what their response is. I'm going to see if they've got, any rebuttals and or any deferrals that they're going to try and make. I need to talk to a lawyer. I need to do this. I need to do that. I just need some time to think about it. And if I feel like they're trying to shut down and pull away from me, I'll change the conversation again. And I'll get the conversation coming back And once I get the conversation coming back, I'll be like, so I know you need some more time to think about this. I know you want to talk to Susie about that, but what kind of questions do you have? So that way when you are talking to Susie, maybe I can have some of these questions answered for you from my side and you can see what's going on here. Well, I just don't understand why the offer needs to be this. So there is the exact reason why they're trying to shut it down. They don't really want to talk to Susie. They're just confused about why they're getting far less than what they wanted. Once I know that, I then go through this all again, and if it's still seeming like the 50 is just not happening, I'll be like, all right, so I know that 50 just isn't working for you. I do have other options that can make this work well for you. I could probably get somewhere close to 60 if you'd give me 6 to 9 months to pay this off. And if you give me 6 to 9 months to pay this off, I can probably put an extra $10,000 to $12,000 in your back pocket. What I've done is I've made a lower offer than what I'd be willing to pay cash. And then what I'd be willing to pay cash, I offered in a 6 to 9 month financing term. What that does for me is several things. If I'm using private money to acquire these properties, then I can eliminate my acquisition costs of private capital. If I'm paying cash for it, this does me no benefit other than keeping my cash liquid. But if I can get that seller to finance it to me for 6 to 9 months, this gives me an opportunity to do multiple different exit strategies with this. I can rehab this thing and sell it with the seller's cash being my financing. Fix it up, turn around, sell it. Now I don't have to pay the acquisition costs. I can turn around and sell it. And since I was willing to pay 60 for it, I got a really smoking hot deal, and I got it financed from the seller. Option number 2 is I don't rehab it and then turn around and sell it. I rehab it, do a cash out refinance, throw it into my rental portfolio, and I use the seller's underlying lien to finance that project. Option number 3 is I can take it directly from the seller and just throw it straight onto the MLS with maybe a prehab, a little light fluff and puff, out the door, and once again, I make my money again. So there's 3 different ways you can exit that short-term offer and still come out really, really good. So what I've done though is I've made my initial offer extremely low, and then I've made my cash or my short-term financing offer where I'd probably like to be at cash, and that gives me an opportunity to wiggle room either one of those 2 offers. I could probably bring my $50,000 cash offer up to about 60 grand, and I could probably take my $60,000 short-term financed offer up to 65, 75. Gives me some wiggle room to negotiate. And then my last and final offer, if I can see that the bait's not really pulling, I know that they're asking for 90. What I'll do is I'll open up a 10B2 calculator, and why the air conditioner is still not on, I have no clue. The 10B2 calculator I'll pull out and I'll see an amortization schedule. Looking at the amortization schedule, I can see if I offer this person a long-term financing option of 30 years, looking at that, I can very quickly see that if I offer them $120,000 cash today, if I offer them $120,000 finance today, and I amortize that out over 30 years, and I make 30 years worth of payments on this thing, I will have paid close to $240,000 for this house. 3% interest, 4% interest, I don't really care. I'm just throwing some arbitrary numbers out there. So the next offer I'm going to make is, well, if you'd give me, if you'd allow me to make 360 payments on this, I'll give you $240,000 for this house. Now, boom, I started out really low. Now that $240,000 sounds really freaking amazing. And it's kind of the opposite of with retail. If you've read the book Influence, and I've done this for a long time, and I didn't really understand what was happening until I read the book Influence. But when you go into a retail store, like a really fine clothing store, some people might think, well, I'm going to start out with a low ticket price item, let them pick that, and then I'm going to start trying to get them to look at some of the higher price items and then work them into the expensive stuff. No, it's the exact opposite. I should stick them with the highest price thing that I can possibly sell them first and work that. And if that doesn't work, then it's much easier to go into the middle price point or a price point just a little bit less than that, and then get them to negotiate off of that because they're immediately thinking, I'm not paying $10,000 for a suit. $7,000 sounds a lot better. But if I initially start out with, well, I'll get you a $600 suit, and then try to sell them the $8,000 suit, you're not going to make it happen, and it's psychological. If I hit them up front with a shock, the thing that I follow up with next is going to seem a lot more appealing versus showing them something appealing and then hitting them with a shock. It's going to be hard to move up. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with a house, except for I'm working in different numbers. I'm going to hit them really low for that shock, and then I'm going to hit them with some other offers that are far more appealing so that they're more likely to accept one. And by giving them multiple offers, they have choices, and almost always, if you give them 3 choices, they'll pick one.
But if they don't, like I know your strategy of, well, camp out in their front yard. For those of us who don't necessarily want to camp out in the front yard, follow up is key. You got to stay on top of these people. I remember several years ago, a woman I ran into at a networking event. She was like, Ryan, I went on a house, made an offer, and it was great. Okay, cool. Did you buy the house? Well, no. Did you follow up? Well, no. I didn't. We couldn't really afford the house anyway. I'm like, so not only did you waste her time, you wasted your time, the seller's time, and now you're wasting my time with the story, and now I am wasting all of your time with the story just because she wouldn't follow up and actually